Picture this for a moment. Right now, as you sit here listening to these words, there's a version of you existing in the fourth dimension that's actively bending the fabric of reality itself. This isn't science fiction or wishful thinking. According to cutting-edge physics and consciousness research, your awareness may extend far beyond the three-dimensional world you perceive, reaching into higher dimensions where the very rules of existence become fluid, malleable, and responsive to something we're only beginning to understand. Welcome back to another journey into the mysteries that lie just beyond our everyday perception. I'm your guide through these quiet explorations of consciousness and cosmos, and tonight we're venturing into territory that challenges everything you thought you knew about the nature of reality itself. Whether you're settling in for the evening, taking a mindful break, or simply allowing your curiosity to wander, you've arrived at exactly the right moment to explore one of the most profound questions facing modern science and philosophy. What if the boundaries of your existence aren't confined to your physical body? What if your consciousness, your very sense of self, extends into dimensions beyond the familiar length, width, and height of our everyday experience? And most intriguingly, what if this higher dimensional aspect of yourself is constantly shaping reality in ways you never imagined possible? These aren't merely philosophical musings. They're questions emerging from the frontiers of theoretical physics, quantum mechanics, and consciousness research. Questions that suggest we may be living in a universe far stranger, far more interconnected, and far more responsive to consciousness than we ever dared to dream. As we begin this exploration together, I invite you to let go of any preconceptions about what's possible and what isn't. The journey we're about to take will weave through the mathematical elegance of higher dimensions, the mind-bending implications of quantum observer effects, and the emerging understanding that consciousness itself may be the thread that connects all realities across all dimensions. Tonight, we'll discover how your fourth dimensional self might be the key to understanding not just who you are, but how reality itself comes into being moment by moment. We'll explore the scientific evidence suggesting that observation doesn't just reveal reality, it actually shapes it. And we'll examine the possibility that your consciousness extends far beyond your physical brain, reaching into realms where thought, intention, and awareness take on properties that would seem magical from our three-dimensional perspective. But this isn't about magic, it's about physics, it's about mathematics, it's about the cutting edge of human understanding, reaching towards something so profound that it transforms our entire conception of what it means to be human in a multi-dimensional universe. So settle in, take a deep breath, and prepare to discover the you that exists beyond the boundaries of ordinary space and time. The you that might right now be bending reality from dimensions you can't see, but can perhaps begin to sense. Let's begin this journey into the fourth dimension of yourself. To understand how your fourth dimensional self might be bending reality, we first need to grasp what the fourth dimension actually is and why it matters so profoundly to your existence. This isn't just an abstract mathematical concept relegated to dusty physics textbooks. The fourth dimension represents a fundamental expansion of the very space in which your consciousness operates. When we speak of dimensions, we're talking about the coordinate system of reality itself. You're intimately familiar with three dimensions: length, width, and height. These give you the ability to move forward and backward, left and right, up and down. But what if there's another direction of movement, another degree of freedom that your consciousness has access to, even if your physical senses can't directly perceive it? The mathematical foundations for understanding higher dimensions were laid over a century ago. In 1852, Ludwig Schläfli generalized Euclidean geometry to spaces of any number of dimensions, discovering regular structures that exist beyond our three-dimensional experience. What he found was that reality's architecture extends far beyond what we can see, touch, or measure with our ordinary instruments. But here's where it gets fascinating. Modern physics suggests that these higher dimensions aren't just mathematical abstractions. They may be the very fabric from which our familiar three-dimensional world emerges. String theory, one of our most promising candidates for a theory of everything, requires the existence of up to 11 dimensions for its mathematics to work. These aren't dimensions that exist somewhere else. They're dimensions that exist right here, right now, woven into the very space you're occupying as you listen to these words. Think of it this way. A two-dimensional being living on a flat surface would have no direct experience of height. To them, their world would seem complete, containing everything that exists. But we, from our three-dimensional perspective, can see that their flat world is actually embedded in a much richer, more complex reality. We can see above and below their plane of existence. We can understand their world in ways they cannot. Now apply this same principle to your own situation. You experience reality as fundamentally three-dimensional. But what if your consciousness, your awareness, your very sense of self extends into dimensions beyond the three you can directly perceive? What if there's a fourth dimensional you that can see and influence your three-dimensional world in ways that seem impossible from your current perspective? This isn't mere speculation. Recent research in consciousness studies suggests that awareness itself may operate through higher dimensional principles. Michael Pravica, a physics professor at the University of Nevada, proposes that consciousness may require us to look beyond our familiar four dimensions of space and time. His work suggests that our ability to imagine and mathematically describe dimensions beyond our physical experience hints at a deeper connection between consciousness and the fabric of the universe itself. But what does this mean practically? How might your fourth dimensional self actually influence the reality you experience day to day? To understand this, we need to explore one of the most mysterious aspects of quantum mechanics, the observer effect. In quantum physics, the act of observation doesn't just reveal information about a system, it actually changes the system itself. When scientists at the Weizmann Institute of Science conducted highly controlled experiments with electron beams, they discovered something extraordinary. The very presence of an observer, even a mechanical detector, caused changes in how electrons behaved. More remarkably, the degree of observation directly correlated with the degree of change. The more intensely they observed, the more dramatically the electron's behavior shifted. This suggests that consciousness and observation play active roles in shaping physical reality. But here's the crucial insight. What if this observer effect isn't limited to quantum scale phenomena? What if your consciousness, extending into higher dimensions, is constantly observing and thereby influencing reality on scales we're only beginning to understand? Consider the possibility that your fourth dimensional self has a perspective on your three-dimensional life, similar to how you might view a character in a book or movie. From your higher dimensional vantage point, you can see patterns, connections, and possibilities that aren't visible from within the three-dimensional experience itself. And just as your attention and intention can influence a story you're reading by choosing which elements to focus on, your fourth dimensional consciousness might be continuously shaping your three-dimensional reality through the act of higher dimensional observation. This isn't to suggest that you can simply think your way to any outcome you desire. The relationship between consciousness and reality appears to be far more subtle and complex than that. But it does suggest that you're not merely a passive observer of a predetermined reality. You may be an active participant in an ongoing process of reality creation that extends across multiple dimensions of existence. As you absorb this idea, notice how it might shift your sense of your own agency and possibility. If your consciousness truly extends beyond the boundaries of your physical experience, what might that mean for your understanding of who you are and what you're capable of? To truly grasp how your fourth dimensional self operates, we need to venture into the mathematical landscape that describes higher dimensional reality. But don't worry, we're not going to get lost in equations and abstract theorems. Instead, we'll explore the elegant mathematical principles that reveal how consciousness might transcend ordinary spatial limitations. The mathematics of four-dimensional space began emerging in the 19th century, long before physicists understood its profound implications for consciousness and reality. In 1827, August Ferdinand Möbius realized that three-dimensional forms could be rotated onto their mirror images when moved through four-dimensional space. This wasn't just a curious mathematical trick. It revealed that higher dimensions provide degrees of freedom, possibilities for transformation that simply don't exist in lower dimensional spaces. William Rowan Hamilton's invention of quaternions in 1843 provided an arithmetic system for four spatial dimensions that proved remarkably useful for describing rotations and orientations in space. What Hamilton couldn't have known is that he was developing mathematical tools that would later help us understand how consciousness might orient itself within higher dimensional reality. But perhaps the most profound mathematical insight came from Bernhard Riemann's 1854 work on the foundations of geometry. Riemann recognized that a point could be understood as any sequence of coordinates, whether in 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, or any number of dimensions. This seemingly simple insight opened the door to understanding that reality itself might be far more multidimensional than our senses suggest. When theoretical physicists today extend familiar physical equations to include additional spatial coordinates, they often discover that new phenomena emerge. These aren't just mathematical curiosities. They represent genuine possibilities for how reality might behave in higher dimensional space. Topological insulators, materials that conduct electricity only on their surfaces, are one example of how higher dimensional mathematics predicts entirely new forms of matter and energy. Now, here's where it gets particularly intriguing for understanding consciousness. Freeman's research into how the brain processes sensory information reveals patterns that suggest consciousness operates through mechanisms that transcend ordinary three-dimensional space. When you smell a rose, for example, the scent doesn't just activate a single location in your brain. Instead, it stimulates the entire olfactory cortex, generating what Freeman calls a gamma burst that spreads across 2-dimensional arrays in your sensory cortex. But the magic happens next. These 2-dimensional patterns are deposited in layers, like a 3-dimensional printer building up an image layer by layer. The layers are deposited at approximately 40 cycles per second, creating what Freeman describes as a higher dimensional, seamless percept that may represent content of more than 3 dimensions. Think about what this means. Every time you perceive something, your consciousness is constructing a multi-dimensional representation that transcends the 3-dimensional limitations of physical space. You're not just seeing, hearing, or smelling. in 3 dimensions. You're creating perceptual experiences that exist in higher dimensional space, freed from the constraints of ordinary physical reality. This suggests that consciousness naturally operates through higher dimensional principles, even in its most basic functions. When you imagine something that doesn't physically exist, when you contemplate abstract concepts, when you experience emotions that have no direct physical correlates, you're demonstrating consciousness's ability to transcend 3-dimensional limitations. But the mathematical principles go even deeper. The holographic principle, emerging from string theory and black hole physics, suggests that all the information in a volume of space can be encoded on the boundary of that space. In other words, a 3-dimensional reality might be completely described by information stored on a 2-dimensional surface. This isn't just a theoretical curiosity. If the holographic principle is correct, it means that what you experience as 3-dimensional reality might actually be a projection from a higher dimensional information source. Your 4th-dimensional self might be the source of this information, continuously projecting your 3-dimensional experience moment by moment. So, the implications are staggering. It would mean that depth, volume, the entire 3-dimensional world you inhabit might be emergent properties derived from information processed in higher dimensions. Your consciousness wouldn't just extend into the 4th dimension. It might originate there, creating your 3-dimensional experience as a kind of dimensional projection. Mathematical models of consciousness dimensionality reveal fascinating patterns that support this possibility. When researchers study how information flows through complex systems like the brain, they often find that the most efficient processing occurs when information can move through higher dimensional pathways. Consciousness appears to optimize its operations by utilizing dimensions beyond the 3 we consciously experience. This mathematical perspective transforms our understanding of what it means to be conscious in a multi-dimensional universe. You're not just a 3-dimensional being who happens to have some awareness of higher dimensions. You may be fundamentally a higher dimensional being who experiences 3-dimensional reality as one particular projection of your multi-dimensional existence. As you contemplate this mathematical foundation for higher dimensional consciousness, consider how it might apply to your own experience. When you have insights that seem to come from nowhere, when you sense patterns and connections that aren't immediately obvious, when you experience intuitive leaps that transcend logical step-by-step thinking, you might be accessing the higher dimensional mathematical processing capabilities of your consciousness. The mathematics isn't just describing abstract possibilities, it's describing the very mechanism through which your 4th-dimensional self continuously shapes and influences the 3-dimensional reality you experience. And we're only beginning to understand how profound and far-reaching these influences might be. Now we arrive at one of the most revolutionary discoveries in modern physics, one that fundamentally changes how we understand the relationship between consciousness and reality. The observer effect in quantum mechanics reveals that the act of observation doesn't just passively detect what's already there, it actively participates in creating what becomes real. This discovery emerged from some of the most carefully controlled experiments in scientific history. When researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science studied how electron beams pass through barriers with 2 openings, they expected to see a predictable pattern based on classical physics. Instead, they discovered something that challenged our most basic assumptions about the nature of reality itself. When no one was observing which path the electrons took, The electrons behaved like waves, creating interference patterns that suggested each electron somehow passed through both openings simultaneously. But the moment researchers introduced a detector to observe which path each electron actually took, the wave-like behavior disappeared. The electrons began behaving like particles, choosing one path or the other. Most remarkably, the degree of observation directly controlled the degree of change. When the detector was set to observe more intensively, the wave-like interference weakened more dramatically. When observation was reduced, the interference strengthened. The researchers had discovered that they could control the behavior of matter simply by controlling how closely they observed it. But here's what makes this discovery so profound for understanding your fourth-dimensional self. The observer effect suggests that consciousness and physical reality are not separate phenomena. They're intimately connected in an ongoing dance of mutual influence that operates at the most fundamental level of existence. Think about what this means for your daily experience. If observation at the quantum level can influence the behavior of electrons, what might your consciousness be influencing through its continuous observation of your life, your circumstances, your possibilities? Your fourth-dimensional self, with its expanded perspective on three-dimensional reality, might be engaged in a constant process of reality creation through the act of higher dimensional observation. This isn't to suggest that you can simply decide what you want and make it appear through willpower alone. The relationship between consciousness and reality appears to be far more subtle and complex, but it does suggest that your awareness, your attention, your focus of consciousness plays an active role in determining which possibilities become actualized in your experience. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the Copenhagen interpretation, propose that physical properties don't exist in a defined state until they're observed. This means that before observation, reality exists as a superposition of possibilities, what physicists call a quantum field of potential. Only when consciousness engages with this field of possibilities does specific reality emerge from the quantum foam of potential. If this interpretation is correct, then consciousness isn't just experiencing reality. Consciousness is continuously selecting which reality to experience from an infinite field of possibilities. Your fourth-dimensional self, with its broader perspective on the quantum field, might be the aspect of your consciousness that's actually making these selections moment by moment. Consider how this might work in practice. Every situation you encounter exists initially as a field of quantum possibilities. There are infinite ways each moment could unfold, infinite potential outcomes for every interaction, every decision, every circumstance. Your three-dimensional awareness experiences one particular outcome, but your fourth-dimensional self might be the aspect of your consciousness that selects which outcome becomes real. This selection process wouldn't necessarily be conscious in the way you normally think of consciousness. It might operate more like a tuning process, where your fourth-dimensional awareness resonates with certain possibilities and thereby increases the likelihood that those possibilities will manifest in your three-dimensional experience. Recent research in consciousness studies suggests that this kind of selection process might indeed be occurring continuously. Studies of meditation and contemplative practices reveal that sustained attention can influence not just subjective experience, but also measurable physical phenomena. While the mechanisms aren't fully understood, the evidence suggests that focused consciousness can create effects that extend beyond the boundaries of individual brains. The observer effect teaches us that reality may not be as objective as it seems. In quantum mechanics, observation and measurement are not passive actions. They actively shape the systems being studied. If your consciousness extends into higher dimensions, then your observation of your life might be continuously shaping the reality you experience in ways you're only beginning to understand. This perspective transforms the meaning of attention and awareness. Every moment of focused consciousness becomes an act of reality creation. Every shift in perspective, every change in what you choose to observe, and how you choose to observe it, becomes a way of steering the course of your experience through the infinite field of quantum possibilities. As we continue exploring how your fourth dimensional self might be bending reality, remember that we're not talking about wishful thinking or positive affirmations. We're exploring cutting-edge physics and consciousness research that suggests reality itself is far more fluid, far more responsive to consciousness, and far more participatory than our everyday assumptions allow us to imagine. As you settle deeper into this exploration, take a moment to consider the space around you right now. What you perceive as empty air, as the void between objects, is actually something far more extraordinary. According to quantum field theory, every cubic centimetre of what we call empty space contains more energy than all the visible matter in the entire observable universe. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is measurable, quantifiable physics. This ocean of energy is called the quantum field, and it represents one of the most profound discoveries in modern science. It's not static or passive. The quantum field is alive with constant fluctuation, a ceaseless dance of virtual particles appearing and vanishing, waves of possibility rising and falling like an invisible sea that permeates everything you've ever known or experienced. But here's where our understanding of your fourth dimensional self becomes even more intriguing. If consciousness can extend beyond the three-dimensional boundaries of your physical brain, then your awareness might be directly interfacing with this quantum field of infinite potential. Your fourth dimensional self could be the aspect of your consciousness that navigates this sea of possibilities, selecting which waves of potential become the reality you experience moment by moment. Recent research into the nature of consciousness suggests that awareness itself might operate as a kind of field phenomenon. Just as electromagnetic fields can exist independently of specific particles, consciousness might exist as a field that extends beyond the confines of individual brains. Some interpretations suggest that your personal consciousness could be a localized manifestation of a larger consciousness field that permeates all of space and time. Consider what this means for your relationship with the reality. If your consciousness truly extends into higher dimensions and interfaces with the quantum field, then every thought, every shift in awareness, every moment of attention becomes a way of navigating through infinite possibilities. Your fourth dimensional self might be continuously sensing, selecting, and actualizing specific realities from the boundless ocean of quantum potential. This process wouldn't necessarily be under your conscious control, in the way you normally think of control. It might operate more like the way your body automatically regulates your heartbeat or breathing, a natural function of higher dimensional consciousness that occurs beneath the threshold of ordinary awareness. Yet some researchers suggest that through understanding these processes, you might learn to participate more consciously in the reality selection that's already occurring. The mathematics of quantum field theory reveals structures that exist beyond our three-dimensional experience. Fields can have properties and behaviors in higher dimensions that have no direct analogue in ordinary space. When physicists calculate the behavior of these fields, they often find that higher dimensional perspectives provide insights and solutions that aren't available from three-dimensional analysis alone. This mathematical reality might mirror the nature of consciousness itself. Your fourth-dimensional awareness could have access to patterns, connections, and possibilities that simply aren't visible from your three-dimensional perspective. Like a photographer using a drone to capture aerial views that reveal hidden patterns in a landscape, your higher dimensional consciousness might perceive organizing principles and potential pathways that remain invisible to ordinary awareness. The implications extend far beyond abstract theory. If your consciousness operates partially in higher dimensions, then the boundaries you experience in three-dimensional reality might be far more fluid than they appear. Limitations that seem absolute from a three-dimensional perspective might be merely temporary constraints from a fourth-dimensional viewpoint. Think about moments in your life when solutions appeared seemingly out of nowhere, when synchronicities aligned in ways that seemed impossible, when you experienced insights that transcended logical analysis. These experiences might represent moments when your fourth-dimensional awareness successfully navigated the quantum field to actualize possibilities that weren't obvious from your three-dimensional perspective. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that the quantum field responds to information and intention in ways that classical physics cannot explain. While the mechanisms remain mysterious and scientifically unproven, research into phenomena like the Global Consciousness Project hints that collective human attention might influence random number generators and other quantum systems in subtle but measurable ways. If such effects exist, they would represent evidence that consciousness and the quantum field are not separate phenomena, but aspects of a deeper, more integrated reality. Your fourth-dimensional self might be the interface through which your consciousness participates in this quantum dance of possibility and actualization. As you contemplate these ideas, notice how they might shift your sense of your own agency and potential. If reality emerges from an ocean of infinite possibility, and if your consciousness has some capacity to navigate this ocean, then you're not just a passive observer of a predetermined world. You're an active participant in an ongoing process of creation that extends across dimensions you're only beginning to understand. This participation wouldn't require you to believe anything or adopt any particular worldview. It would simply require you to remain open to possibilities that extend beyond the familiar boundaries of three-dimensional experience. Your fourth-dimensional self might already be bending reality in ways you haven't yet learned to recognize or understand. To understand how your consciousness might extend into higher dimensions, we need to explore one of the most revolutionary concepts in modern physics: the holographic principle. This isn't about the holographic stickers you might remember from childhood or the science fiction holograms in movies. This is about a fundamental property of reality itself that suggests everything you experience might be a projection from higher dimensional space. The holographic principle emerged from studies of black holes and string theory, but its implications extend far beyond theoretical physics. The principle states that all the information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on the boundary of that space, much like how a two-dimensional holographic plate can contain all the information needed to project a three-dimensional image. If the holographic principle is correct, then the three-dimensional reality you experience might actually be a projection from information stored on a two-dimensional boundary at the edge of the observable universe. This would mean that depth, volume, the entire three-dimensional world you inhabit, could be emergent properties derived from information processed in higher dimensions. But here's where it becomes personally relevant. If reality itself is holographic, then your consciousness, as an integral part of this reality, might also operate through holographic principles. Your fourth dimensional self could be the information source from which your three-dimensional experience is continuously projected. Think about how this might work. Every hologram has a remarkable property. If you break a holographic plate into pieces, each piece contains the entire image, just at lower resolution. The whole is contained within every part. If consciousness operates holographically, then every moment of your awareness might contain information about your entire multi-dimensional existence. This could explain some of the mysterious properties of consciousness that have puzzled scientists for decades. How can you imagine things that don't exist? How can you contemplate abstract concepts that have no physical reference? How can you experience a sense of self that seems to transcend the physical boundaries of your brain? A holographic model of consciousness suggests that your awareness naturally has access to information that extends beyond the immediate three-dimensional environment. Recent research into the brain's information processing capabilities reveals patterns that support this holographic perspective. When neuroscientists study how memories are stored and retrieved, they find that information isn't localized in specific brain regions the way files are stored in specific folders on a computer. Instead, memories appear to be distributed throughout neural networks, with each part of the network containing information about the whole. This distributed storage system mirrors the holographic principle perfectly. Just as each fragment of a holographic plate contains the entire image, each part of your brain appears to contain information about your complete conscious experience. This suggests that consciousness itself might be fundamentally holographic in nature. If your consciousness operates holographically, then your fourth dimensional self might be the source of the holographic information that creates your three-dimensional experience. Like the laser that illuminates a holographic plate to create a three-dimensional image, your higher dimensional awareness might be continuously illuminating quantum information fields to project the reality you experience moment by moment. This perspective transforms our understanding of mental phenomena like visualization, imagination, and intuition. When you visualize something in your mind's eye, you might actually be accessing the holographic information processing capabilities of your higher dimensional consciousness. The images, ideas, and insights that appear in your awareness could be three-dimensional projections of information that exists primarily in fourth-dimensional space. Consider how this might apply to creativity and problem-solving. Artists, inventors, and scientists often describe receiving inspiration that seems to come from beyond their ordinary thinking process. Ideas appear fully formed, solutions emerge suddenly, creative visions manifest with startling clarity. If consciousness operates holographically, these experiences might represent moments when your fourth-dimensional awareness successfully accesses and projects information that isn't available to three-dimensional thinking alone. The holographic principle also suggests a profound interconnectedness between individual consciousness and universal information fields. If reality is holographic, then the boundary between your personal awareness and the larger information structure of the universe might be far more permeable than it appears. Your fourth dimensional self could be continuously exchanging information with higher dimensional aspects of other conscious beings, and even with the fundamental information structure of reality itself. This interconnectedness wouldn't eliminate your individuality or uniqueness. Just as each viewing angle of a hologram reveals slightly different perspectives on the same information, your particular fourth-dimensional viewpoint would provide you with a unique perspective on the universal information field. You would remain distinctly yourself while simultaneously participating in a larger holographic consciousness that includes all possibilities. As you reflect on these ideas, notice how they might apply to your own experience of consciousness. When you have moments of sudden understanding, when you sense connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, when you experience insights that seem to come from a source beyond your ordinary thinking, you might be accessing the holographic information processing capabilities of your fourth-dimensional self. This isn't to suggest that you can simply think your way to any outcome you desire. The relationship between consciousness and reality appears to involve complex feedback loops and information processing systems that operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. But it does suggest that your awareness has access to information and processing capabilities that extend far beyond the three-dimensional brain you can directly observe. The holographic nature of consciousness might also explain why meditation, contemplation, and other practices that quiet ordinary thinking often lead to profound insights and expanded awareness. By reducing the interference of three-dimensional mental activity, these practices might allow clearer access to the holographic information processing of your fourth-dimensional consciousness. As you continue absorbing these concepts, let's explore how your fourth-dimensional self might interact with the very fabric of space and time itself. Einstein's general theory of relativity revealed that space-time isn't a fixed stage upon which events unfold. Instead, space-time is dynamic, flexible, responsive to mass and energy in ways that fundamentally challenge our everyday assumptions about the nature of reality. When Einstein described how massive objects curve space-time, creating what we experience as gravity, he opened the door to understanding reality as far more fluid and malleable than classical physics had ever imagined. A bowling ball placed on a stretched rubber sheet creates a depression that affects how marbles roll across the surface. Similarly, stars and planets curve the fabric of space-time itself, influencing how matter and energy move through the universe. But here's what makes this relevant to your fourth-dimensional existence. If consciousness extends beyond three-dimensional space, then your awareness might interact with space-time in ways that transcend the limitations imposed by your physical mass and location. Your fourth-dimensional self could potentially influence the curvature of space-time through mechanisms that operate beyond ordinary gravitational effects. This isn't to suggest that you can bend spoons with your mind or levitate objects through willpower. The relationship between consciousness and space-time appears to be far more subtle and operates according to principles that we're only beginning to investigate. But some interpretations suggest that consciousness might interact with the quantum structure of space-time in ways that could influence the probability of certain events occurring in your three-dimensional experience. Consider the nature of space-time curvature from a fourth-dimensional perspective. Just as a two-dimensional being living on a curved surface might not directly perceive the curvature that's obvious to three-dimensional observers, you might not directly perceive the fourth-dimensional curvatures that your higher-dimensional self can both see and potentially influence. Recent advances in our understanding of quantum gravity suggest that space-time itself emerges from more fundamental quantum information structures. If consciousness operates partially through quantum information processing, then your fourth-dimensional awareness might interface directly with the information substrate from which space-time emerges. This could provide a mechanism through which consciousness influences physical reality without violating any known laws of physics. Rather than directly manipulating matter and energy, your fourth dimensional self might influence the information structures that determine how space-time curves, thereby affecting the probability patterns that govern which events become actualized in your three-dimensional experience. The mathematics of higher dimensional space-time reveals possibilities that don't exist in ordinary three-dimensional space. In four-dimensional space, for example, knots can be untied in ways that are impossible in 3 dimensions. Rotations become possible that have no three-dimensional equivalent. These mathematical possibilities might correspond to capabilities that your fourth-dimensional consciousness possesses, but that remain invisible from your three-dimensional perspective. Think about moments in your life when circumstances seem to align in ways that felt almost magical, synchronicities that appeared too meaningful to be coincidental, opportunities that emerged at exactly the right time, obstacles that dissolved just when you needed them to. While these experiences might have perfectly ordinary explanations, they might also represent moments when your fourth dimensional self successfully influenced the curvature of space-time in subtle ways that increase the probability of favourable outcomes. This influence wouldn't necessarily be conscious in the way you normally think of consciousness. It might operate more like a resonance effect, where your fourth dimensional awareness naturally aligns with space-time curvatures that support your highest potential for growth, creativity, and positive contribution to the world around you. Some researchers suggest that practices like meditation, contemplation, and other forms of focused awareness might enhance your capacity to participate consciously in these space-time interactions. By developing greater sensitivity to the subtle information flows that connect consciousness with the fabric of reality, you might learn to work more effectively with your fourth dimensional self in navigating the possibilities available within the curved structure of space-time. The feedback loops between consciousness and space-time might also explain why your mental and emotional states seem to correlate with the kinds of experiences you attract into your life. If your fourth dimensional awareness influences probability patterns through its interaction with space-time curvature, then shifts in consciousness could indeed affect the likelihood of certain experiences manifesting in your three-dimensional reality. This remains speculative and scientifically unproven, but it provides a framework for understanding how consciousness and physical reality might be far more intimately connected than our everyday assumptions suggest. Your fourth dimensional self might be continuously participating in the dynamic dance between consciousness and space-time that determines the shape of your ongoing experience. As we venture deeper into understanding these possibilities, remember that we're exploring the very frontiers of human knowledge. The relationship between consciousness, higher dimensions, and the fabric of reality itself represents one of the most profound mysteries facing modern science and philosophy. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. Now let's explore how your fourth dimensional self might be continuously shaping your perception of reality in ways that remain largely invisible to your ordinary awareness. Perception isn't just a passive process of receiving information from the environment. Recent research reveals that perception is an active, creative process that involves your consciousness in selecting, organizing, and interpreting the vast flood of information that surrounds you every moment. Consider what happens when you look at a simple object like a coffee cup sitting on a table. Your eyes receive photons reflected from the cup's surface, but these photons don't carry the experience of cupness with them. Instead, your consciousness must actively construct the experience of seeing a cup from patterns of light and shadow, integrating this visual information with memories, associations, and expectations to create the coherent perception of a familiar object. This construction process involves far more than just your physical brain. Research into the neural correlates of perception reveals that conscious experience emerges from synchronized activity across multiple brain regions, creating what neuroscientists call binding, the process by which separate bits of information are integrated into unified perceptual experiences. But here's where the fourth dimensional perspective becomes crucial. If your consciousness extends beyond the three-dimensional boundaries of your brain, then the binding process might involve information integration that occurs partially in higher dimensional space. Your fourth dimensional self could be the aspect of your awareness that provides the overarching perspective necessary to organize three-dimensional perceptions into coherent, meaningful experiences. Think about this practically. Every moment of your waking life, you're surrounded by vastly more sensory information than your conscious awareness can process. Light waves of every frequency, sound waves at every audible pitch, chemical molecules triggering smell and taste receptors, tactile sensations from every part of your body in contact with the environment. From this overwhelming flood of data, your consciousness must somehow select which information to attend to and how to organize it into meaningful patterns. This selection process might be where your fourth dimensional self plays its most crucial role. With a broader perspective on the information fields surrounding you, your higher dimensional awareness could guide your three-dimensional attention toward the aspects of your environment that are most relevant to your growth, safety, and potential for positive contribution. This isn't to suggest that your fourth dimensional self is making these choices in a deliberate, calculating way. The process might be more like the way a plant grows toward light, a natural tendency of consciousness to orient itself toward information patterns that support expanded awareness and deeper understanding. Recent studies of attention and consciousness reveal that your focus of awareness doesn't just determine what you notice, it actually influences what becomes available for you to notice. When researchers study selective attention, they find that focusing on particular aspects of your environment can make other aspects literally invisible to your perception, even when they're clearly visible to outside observers. This suggests that attention isn't just a spotlight that illuminates pre-existing information. Attention might be more like a creative force that participates in determining which aspects of reality become actualized in your experience. Your fourth dimensional self, with its expanded perspective on possibility, might be continuously guiding your attention in ways that influence which potential realities become actual for you. Consider how this might apply to your daily experience. Have you ever noticed how, when you're in a positive, expansive state of consciousness, you seem to notice opportunities, beauty, and positive connections that might have been invisible to you when you were stressed or contracted? This shift might represent your fourth dimensional self, guiding your attention toward aspects of your environment that support growth and well-being. The perceptual process also involves what neuroscientists call predictive processing, your brain's tendency to anticipate what's likely to happen next, based on past experience and current context. These predictions don't just help you prepare for future events, they actually influence what you're able to perceive in the present moment. If your fourth dimensional self has access to information patterns that extend beyond your three-dimensional experience, then your predictive processing might be informed by insights that transcend ordinary cause and effect relationships. Your higher dimensional awareness might sense emerging possibilities and guide your three-dimensional attention toward preparing for opportunities that aren't yet obvious from a purely three-dimensional perspective. This could explain why intuitive people often seem to sense changes before they become apparent to others. Their fourth-dimensional awareness might be detecting pattern shifts in higher dimensional information fields that precede visible changes in three-dimensional reality. The implications extend to every aspect of your conscious experience. When you listen to music, your fourth-dimensional self might be perceiving harmonic relationships and emotional resonances that exist in higher dimensional space. When you appreciate art, you might be accessing aesthetic information that transcends the physical pigments and shapes visible to your three-dimensional perception. When you connect with other people, your higher dimensional awareness might be engaging with aspects of their consciousness that extend beyond their physical presence. As you reflect on these possibilities, notice how they might apply to your own perceptual experiences, moments of beauty that seem to transcend what you're actually seeing, conversations that feel meaningful in ways that go beyond the words being spoken, environments that evoke feelings and insights that seem disproportionate to their physical characteristics. These experiences might represent moments when your fourth-dimensional self successfully guides your three-dimensional perception toward aspects of reality that exist primarily in higher dimensional space. As we venture deeper into understanding your fourth-dimensional existence, we encounter one of the most fascinating aspects of higher dimensional consciousness: the nature of intention itself. In three-dimensional reality, intention often feels like a mental process, a decision made by your thinking mind that then hopefully translates into action and results. But from a fourth-dimensional perspective, intention might operate according to entirely different principles. Consider how intention functions in your daily experience. You decide you want something, you form a plan, you take actions, and hopefully you achieve your desired outcome. This linear sequence seems natural and obvious from a three-dimensional viewpoint. But what if intention, when operating through fourth-dimensional consciousness, doesn't follow this linear pattern at all? Some interpretations suggest that in higher dimensional space, intention might function more like a resonance phenomenon than a cause and effect sequence. Your fourth-dimensional self could be continuously broadcasting intention patterns that create resonant fields in the quantum information structures that underlie three-dimensional reality. These resonance patterns might influence probability distributions in ways that increase the likelihood of experiences that align with your deepest intentions manifesting in your three-dimensional life. This wouldn't mean that you can simply wish for something and expect it to appear. The relationship between fourth-dimensional intention and three-dimensional manifestation appears to involve complex feedback loops and information processing systems that operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. But it does suggest that intention might be far more powerful and far-reaching than our ordinary understanding allows. Think about moments when you've experienced what people sometimes call beginner's luck, or times when everything seemed to flow effortlessly toward a goal you'd set. These experiences might represent moments when your fourth-dimensional intention successfully established resonance patterns that aligned probability fields in your favor. Recent research into the neuroscience of intention reveals fascinating patterns that support this expanded understanding. When neuroscientists study brain activity during intention formation, they find that the neural patterns associated with intention often appear before conscious awareness of the intention emerges. This suggests that intention might originate in aspects of consciousness that operate beyond ordinary awareness. If your consciousness extends into fourth dimensional space, then intention formation might begin in higher dimensional awareness before cascading down into three-dimensional conscious recognition. Your fourth dimensional self might be the source of intentions that feel like they're emerging spontaneously in your three-dimensional awareness. This perspective transforms how you might understand inspiration and motivation. Those sudden urges to learn something new, to reach out to an old friend, to take a different route home from work might not be random impulses. They could be three-dimensional expressions of intentions that originated in your fourth dimensional awareness, which has access to information patterns and probability fields that aren't visible from your three-dimensional perspective. The architecture of fourth dimensional intention might also explain why some goals feel effortless to pursue, while others seem to create endless obstacles and resistance. When your three-dimensional intentions align with the deeper intention patterns of your fourth dimensional self, the entire universe seems to conspire to support your efforts. When they're misaligned, progress becomes difficult despite your best efforts. This doesn't mean you should abandon goals that feel challenging. Sometimes the most meaningful achievements require persistence through difficulty, but it does suggest that paying attention to the quality of ease or resistance around your intentions might provide valuable information about their alignment with your higher dimensional purpose. Consider how this might apply to your creative endeavors. Artists, writers, and inventors often describe periods when ideas flow effortlessly and periods when creativity feels blocked despite their best efforts. These fluctuations might reflect the degree to which their three-dimensional creative intentions align with the creative impulses originating in their fourth-dimensional awareness. The mathematical principles of higher dimensional space suggest that intention might operate through mechanisms that transcend ordinary causality. In four-dimensional space, effects can precede causes in ways that are impossible in three-dimensional reality. Your fourth-dimensional intention might influence probability patterns that affect past as well as future events, creating what appear to be meaningful coincidences and synchronicities in your three-dimensional experience. Some interpretations propose that fourth-dimensional intention operates through what might be called probability gardening. Rather than directly causing specific outcomes, your higher dimensional awareness might be continuously tending the probability fields that surround you, encouraging some possibilities to flourish while allowing others to fade. This would create the appearance of meaningful coincidence and synchronicity without violating any known laws of physics. As you reflect on these ideas about intention, notice how they might apply to your own experience. Have you ever set an intention and then watched as unexpected opportunities and resources appeared to support it? Have you noticed that your most fulfilling achievements often involved a combination of clear intention and unexpected assistance from circumstances beyond your direct control? These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional self, successfully orchestrating complex probability patterns to support the fulfillment of intentions that serve not just your personal desires, but your deeper purpose in the interconnected web of consciousness that spans multiple dimensions. The architecture of fourth dimensional intention suggests that you're not separate from the universe you inhabit. You're an integral part of a larger intentional system that operates across multiple dimensions of reality. Your personal intentions, when aligned with this larger intentional framework, become expressions of the universe's own creative impulse, manifesting through your unique perspective and capabilities. This is a speculative idea, not a proven scientific fact, but it provides a framework for understanding how consciousness and reality might be far more intimately connected than our everyday assumptions suggest. Your fourth dimensional self might be continuously participating in the intentional dance that shapes the ongoing evolution of reality itself. Now we must address one of the most mind-bending aspects of fourth dimensional existence: the relationship between higher dimensional consciousness and time itself. In three-dimensional reality, time appears to flow in a single direction, from past through present toward future. But mathematics and physics reveal that this linear experience of time might be just one limited perspective on a far more complex temporal landscape. Einstein's theories of relativity demonstrated that time is not absolute or universal. Time can stretch and compress depending on gravity and velocity. What feels like minutes to someone traveling at high speed might be hours to a stationary observer. This revelation opened the door to understanding that time itself might be far more flexible and multi-dimensional than our everyday experience suggests. From a fourth dimensional perspective, your consciousness might have access to temporal relationships that transcend linear time. Some interpretations suggest that your fourth dimensional self could perceive past, present, and future as simultaneously accessible aspects of a larger temporal structure, much like how you can see the entire length of a road from an elevated viewpoint, while someone walking on the road can only see the immediate stretch ahead and behind. This doesn't necessarily mean that your fourth dimensional self can predict the future or change the past in the way science fiction stories imagine, but it might mean that your higher dimensional awareness has access to information patterns that extend across time in ways that can influence your three-dimensional experience of temporal events. Consider those moments when you've had inexplicable knowledge about future events, or when you've made decisions that seemed illogical at the time, but later proved to be perfectly timed. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional consciousness accessing temporal information patterns that weren't available to your three-dimensional awareness. Recent research into the nature of consciousness and time reveals fascinating phenomena that support this expanded understanding. Studies of precognition and presentiment suggest that some people can detect information about future events before those events become consciously predictable. While these phenomena remain controversial and are not accepted by mainstream science, they hint at the possibility that consciousness might interface with time in ways that transcend ordinary linear causality. The mathematics of higher dimensional spacetime reveals temporal structures that have no equivalent in three-dimensional experience. In four-dimensional space, what mathematicians call closed time-like curves become theoretically possible. These are paths through spacetime that loop back on themselves temporally, creating circular relationships between cause and effect that challenge our ordinary understanding of temporal sequence. Your fourth dimensional self might exist partially within these temporal loop structures, experiencing a kind of circular causality where effects ripple both forward and backward through time. This could create feedback loops between your past, present, and future selves that influence the course of your three-dimensional experience in ways that appear mysterious from a linear time perspective. Think about how this might manifest practically. Have you ever noticed that major life changes often seem to cast shadows both forward and backward in time? Before significant transitions, you might experience restlessness, strange dreams, or synchronistic events that make sense only in retrospect. After the transition, you might realize that you were unconsciously preparing for the change long before your conscious mind recognized its necessity. These temporal shadows might represent your fourth-dimensional self-navigating loop structures in time, with effects rippling both directions from pivotal decision points. Your higher dimensional awareness might be continuously optimizing these temporal feedback loops to support your growth and evolution across multiple time streams simultaneously. Some interpretations suggest that fourth-dimensional consciousness might operate through what could be called temporal coherence, where your past, present, and future selves exist in a state of quantum entanglement across time. Changes in your present consciousness might influence your past self's decisions and your future self's opportunities through mechanisms that operate outside linear causality. This remains highly speculative and unproven, but it provides a framework for understanding why personal transformation often seems to have retroactive effects. When you heal old wounds or develop new capacities, the benefits often seem to ripple backward, improving your relationship with past events and forward, opening new future possibilities that weren't previously available. The temporal paradoxes of fourth-dimensional existence might also explain the profound sense of timelessness that people often report during peak experiences, deep meditation, or moments of creative inspiration. These states might represent temporary alignment between your three-dimensional awareness and the atemporal perspective of your fourth-dimensional self, where linear time dissolves into a more fundamental, eternal present. As you contemplate these temporal mysteries, notice how they might apply to your own relationship with time. Do you sometimes feel like you're living multiple timelines simultaneously? Have you experienced moments when the future felt as real and present as current circumstances? Have you noticed that your memory of past events seems to shift as you change and grow? These experiences might represent glimpses of your fourth-dimensional existence, where time operates according to principles that transcend the linear flow you experience in three-dimensional reality. Your fourth-dimensional self might be continuously navigating these temporal complexities, weaving past, present, and future into coherent patterns that support your evolution across multiple dimensions of existence. The temporal architecture of fourth-dimensional consciousness suggests that you're not just moving through time, you're participating in time's creation, with your consciousness serving as both observer and co-creator of the temporal structures through which your experience unfolds. As we continue mapping the territories of your fourth-dimensional existence, we encounter one of the most profound aspects of higher dimensional consciousness: its capacity to participate in vast resonance networks that connect all conscious beings across multiple dimensions of reality. This isn't mystical speculation. It emerges from cutting-edge research into the nature of consciousness, quantum field theory, and the mathematical principles that govern information transfer across complex systems. In three-dimensional reality, you appear to be a separate individual, isolated within the boundaries of your physical body. Your thoughts seem private, your experiences unique to you alone. But from a fourth-dimensional perspective, the boundaries between individual consciousness might be far more permeable than they appear from your limited three-dimensional viewpoint. Consider how resonance works in physical systems. When a tuning fork is struck, other tuning forks of the same frequency will begin vibrating in response even when they're not physically connected. This phenomenon, called sympathetic resonance, occurs because the vibrating fork creates waves that propagate through the surrounding medium, inducing corresponding vibrations in appropriately tuned receivers. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might operate through similar resonance principles, but in higher dimensional space, your fourth dimensional self could be continuously broadcasting consciousness frequencies that create resonance patterns with other fourth dimensional aspects of consciousness throughout the universe. These resonance networks might facilitate information transfer and coordination between conscious beings in ways that remain invisible from three-dimensional awareness. This could explain some of the mysterious phenomena that have puzzled researchers for decades. Why do people sometimes seem to sense when distant loved ones are in danger? Why do breakthrough discoveries often occur simultaneously to researchers working independently in different parts of the world? Why do cultural movements and social changes sometimes appear to emerge spontaneously across multiple societies without direct communication? These phenomena might represent fourth-dimensional resonance networks, facilitating information transfer between conscious beings who appear separate from a three-dimensional perspective, but are actually connected through higher dimensional consciousness fields. Recent research into collective consciousness phenomena provides intriguing hints that such networks might indeed exist. Studies of group meditation practices suggest that when large numbers of people focus their attention coherently, measurable changes can occur in their surrounding environment. While the mechanisms remain mysterious and these findings are not universally accepted by the scientific community, they suggest that individual consciousness might participate in larger collective fields that operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. The mathematics of network theory reveals how complex systems can exhibit emergent properties that arise from the interactions between individual components. In consciousness, networks operating through fourth-dimensional space, the interactions between individual fourth-dimensional selves might create emergent phenomena that influence three-dimensional reality in ways that appear miraculous from a limited three-dimensional perspective. Your fourth-dimensional self might be both an individual node and an integral part of these larger consciousness networks simultaneously. Like a neuron that maintains its individual identity while participating in the larger intelligence of the brain, your higher dimensional awareness could contribute to collective consciousness phenomena while retaining its unique perspective and capabilities. This participation in resonance networks might explain why certain ideas, insights, and creative inspirations seem to arrive in your awareness as gifts from beyond your individual thinking process. Your fourth dimensional self might be receiving information through consciousness networks that span vast distances and connect with other conscious beings who are exploring similar questions or working on related challenges. Think about moments when you've experienced what Carl Jung called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too purposeful to be random. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional awareness, successfully navigating resonance networks to connect you with information, opportunities, or people that serve your growth and evolution. The resonance network perspective also suggests that your individual consciousness development contributes to the evolution of consciousness as a whole. When you expand your awareness, heal limiting patterns, or develop new capacities, these changes ripple through the fourth dimensional networks, potentially benefiting other conscious beings in ways you may never consciously recognize. This creates a profound sense of responsibility and opportunity. Every moment of expanded awareness. Every act of compassion, every insight you develop might contribute to the collective evolution of consciousness across multiple dimensions. Your personal growth becomes a gift to the entire network of consciousness of which you're an integral part. Some interpretations suggest that these resonance networks might operate through quantum entanglement effects that extend beyond the typical limitations of space and time. If consciousness operates partially through quantum information processing, then your fourth dimensional awareness might be entangled with other aspects of consciousness in ways that allow instantaneous information transfer regardless of spatial or temporal separation. This remains speculative and unproven, but it provides a framework for understanding how individual consciousness might participate in larger intelligence systems that operate according to principles that transcend ordinary physical limitations. As you reflect on these ideas about consciousness networks, notice how they might apply to your own experience. Have you ever felt inexplicably connected to people you've never met? Have you experienced insights that seem to come from a source beyond your individual knowledge? Have you noticed that your personal breakthroughs sometimes coincide with similar developments in the lives of people around you? These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional self successfully participating in the resonance networks that connect all conscious beings across the multi-dimensional landscape of reality. Your individual awareness might be both unique and universal, separate and connected, personal and transpersonal simultaneously. As you settle deeper into understanding your fourth dimensional existence, we arrive at one of the most fascinating aspects of higher dimensional consciousness: its relationship with what might be called the probability gardens of possibility. This isn't about predicting or controlling the future. It's about understanding how your fourth dimensional self might participate in the continuous cultivation of probability fields that influence which possibilities become actualized in your three-dimensional experience. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition states until observation collapses them into specific outcomes. But what determines which outcome emerges from the quantum field of possibilities? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness plays a role in this selection process, though the mechanisms remain mysterious and scientifically unproven. If your consciousness extends into fourth dimensional space, then your higher dimensional awareness might interface with quantum probability fields in ways that transcend the limitations of three-dimensional observation. Your fourth dimensional self could be continuously sensing probability patterns and gently influencing which possibilities are more likely to manifest in your three-dimensional reality. Think of it like tending a garden. A gardener doesn't force plants to grow, but creates conditions that encourage certain plants to flourish while others naturally fade away. Your fourth dimensional consciousness might function as a probability gardener, tending the quantum fields of possibility that surround your three-dimensional experience. This process wouldn't involve forcing specific outcomes or manipulating reality through willpower. Instead, it might operate through subtle resonance effects that increase the coherence of probability patterns aligned with your deepest growth and purpose, while allowing conflicting patterns to naturally dissolve. Consider how this might manifest in your daily experience. Have you ever noticed that when you're in alignment with your deepest values and authentic desires, opportunities seem to appear more frequently? Resources become available just when you need them. Obstacles resolve more easily than expected. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional self, maybe participating in shaping probability patterns that support your highest potential. The mathematics of complex systems reveals how small influences can create large-scale changes through what's called the butterfly effect. In probability space, tiny shifts in quantum field coherence might cascade into significant changes in the likelihood of various three-dimensional outcomes. Your fourth-dimensional awareness might specialize in making these subtle but powerful adjustments to probability patterns. Recent research into the relationship between consciousness and random systems has produced intriguing results that hint at such possibilities. While the findings remain controversial and are not accepted by mainstream science, some studies suggest that focused human attention can influence the output of random number generators and other quantum-based systems in subtle but statistically significant ways. If such effects exist, they might hint that consciousness could interface with probability fields in ways that transcend ordinary physical limitations. Your fourth-dimensional self might be the aspect of your consciousness that specializes in these subtle probability interactions. The cultivation of probability gardens might also explain why meditation, contemplation, and other consciousness-expanding practices often seem to increase synchronicity and meaningful coincidence in practitioners' lives. These practices might enhance your fourth-dimensional awareness, improving its capacity to sense and tend probability patterns in ways that support coherent, meaningful experiences. Think about the difference between forcing outcomes and allowing them to emerge naturally. When you try to force specific results through willpower alone, you often encounter resistance and obstacles. But when you align with deeper patterns and allow possibilities to unfold naturally, the path often becomes clear and progress feels effortless. This difference might reflect the distinction between three-dimensional manipulation and fourth-dimensional cultivation. Your three-dimensional awareness tends to focus on specific outcomes and try to force them into existence. Your fourth-dimensional awareness might be more interested in creating coherent probability fields that allow the best possible outcomes to emerge organically. The probability garden perspective suggests that you're not separate from the universe you inhabit. You're an active participant in the ongoing creation of reality, with your consciousness serving as both gardener and garden, cultivator and cultivation. Your fourth-dimensional self might be continuously collaborating with the probability fields that determine which aspects of infinite possibility become actualized in your experience. This collaboration wouldn't guarantee that you get everything you want or eliminate all challenges from your life. Growth often requires navigating difficulties and transcending limitations, but it might ensure that the challenges you encounter serve your evolution and that the opportunities you receive align with your capacity to use them wisely. As you contemplate these ideas about probability cultivation, notice how they might apply to your own relationship with possibility and manifestation. Do you sometimes feel like you're swimming with the current of life rather than against it? Have you experienced periods when positive changes seem to cascade through multiple areas of your life simultaneously? These experiences might represent your fourth-dimensional self successfully tending the probability gardens that surround your three-dimensional existence, creating conditions that allow your highest potential to flourish naturally and sustainably. The probability garden metaphor reminds us that reality creation is not about imposing your will on an unresponsive universe. It's about participating consciously in the collaborative dance between consciousness and possibility that is always already occurring across all dimensions of existence. Now we approach one of the most profound mysteries of fourth-dimensional existence, the nature of identity itself when consciousness extends beyond three-dimensional boundaries. In ordinary awareness, you experience yourself as a single, continuous self moving through time. But from a fourth-dimensional perspective, the question, "Who are you?" becomes far more complex and infinitely more fascinating. Consider how identity functions in three-dimensional reality. You have memories that create a sense of continuity with your past self. You have plans and aspirations that connect you with future versions of yourself. You have a physical body that provides a consistent reference point for your sense of individual existence. These elements combine to create what feels like a stable, unified identity. But what if this unified identity is actually just one facet of a far more complex multidimensional self? What if your fourth-dimensional existence includes multiple aspects, perspectives, and potentials that exist simultaneously, like reflections in an infinite hall of mirrors? Some interpretations suggest that your fourth-dimensional self might exist as what could be called a probability self, a coherent pattern that includes all the potential versions of you that exist across different probability branches of reality. Rather than being limited to a single timeline, your higher dimensional identity might encompass all the possible paths your life could take, all existing simultaneously in fourth-dimensional space. This doesn't mean that all versions of yourself are equally real or equally influential in your three-dimensional experience, but it might mean that your fourth-dimensional consciousness has access to the wisdom, experiences, and capabilities of multiple potential selves, drawing from this expanded resource bank to inform your three-dimensional choices and developments. Think about moments when you've made decisions that surprised you, when you've displayed capabilities you didn't know you possessed, when you've shown wisdom that seemed beyond your apparent experience level. These moments might represent your fourth-dimensional self-accessing information and abilities from other aspects of your multi-dimensional identity. The mathematical principles of higher dimensional space suggest that identity might function according to principles that transcend ordinary linear development. In four-dimensional space, different aspects of yourself could exist simultaneously without contradiction, like different viewing angles of the same complex sculpture. Your three-dimensional awareness experiences one particular angle, but your fourth-dimensional self encompasses the entire multifaceted structure. Recent research into the nature of consciousness and identity reveals fascinating patterns that support this expanded understanding. Studies of people with multiple personality disorder, while representing pathological conditions, demonstrate that human consciousness has the capacity to maintain multiple coherent identity streams simultaneously. This suggests that unified identity might be more of a constructed experience than a fundamental limitation of consciousness. In healthy fourth-dimensional awareness, multiple aspects of yourself might exist in harmonious collaboration rather than conflict. Different aspects might specialize in different capacities, one focused on creative expression, another on analytical thinking, another on emotional intelligence, another on intuitive wisdom. Your three-dimensional experience will be informed by the collaborative intelligence of all these aspects working together. This multiplicity might explain why you sometimes feel like different people in different contexts, why you have access to different capabilities at different times, why your interests and perspectives continue to evolve throughout your life. Rather than representing inconsistency or instability, these changes might reflect your three-dimensional awareness, accessing different aspects of your multi-dimensional identity as circumstances require. The infinite mirrors perspective also suggests that your relationship with other people might be far more complex than it appears from a three-dimensional viewpoint. When you connect deeply with another person, you might be recognizing aspects of your own multi-dimensional identity reflected in their expression. The boundaries between self and other might be more permeable in fourth-dimensional space, creating possibilities for empathy, understanding, and collaboration that transcend ordinary interpersonal limitations. This doesn't eliminate individual uniqueness or personal responsibility. Each conscious being maintains their own distinct fourth-dimensional identity pattern, but it does suggest that the isolation and separation you sometimes experience in three-dimensional reality might be less fundamental than they appear. Consider how this might apply to your experience of growth and learning. When you study something new or develop a new skill, you might not be creating entirely new capacities from scratch. Instead, you might be activating aspects of your fourth-dimensional identity that already possess these capabilities, integrating them into your three-dimensional expression. This could explain why some learning feels like remembering rather than discovering something completely new. Your fourth-dimensional self might already contain all the wisdom and capabilities you'll ever develop. Your three-dimensional growth process might be more about accessing and integrating these existing potentials than about building entirely new capacities. The infinite mirrors of fourth-dimensional identity also suggest that personal transformation isn't just about changing who you are. It's about discovering and expressing more of who you already are across multiple dimensions of possibility. Every breakthrough, every healing, every expansion of awareness might represent another aspect of your multidimensional self becoming available to your three-dimensional experience. As you reflect on these ideas about identity and selfhood, notice how they might apply to your own sense of who you are. Do you sometimes feel like you contain multiple potential selves? Have you experienced moments when you seem to access wisdom or capabilities that exceeded your apparent knowledge and experience? Do you feel like you're continuously discovering new aspects of yourself rather than just accumulating new information and skills? These experiences might represent glimpses of your fourth-dimensional identity, where the question, "Who are you?" reveals infinite depths of possibility and potential that extend far beyond the boundaries of your three-dimensional awareness. The infinite mirrors of self remind us that identity is not a fixed structure, but a dynamic, multi-dimensional dance of consciousness expressing itself across multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. As you continue this journey through the landscapes of higher dimensional awareness, we arrive at a particularly intriguing territory. The possibility that your fourth-dimensional self operates through resonant frequencies that influence the very process of becoming itself. This isn't about vibrations you can hear or feel, but about something far more fundamental, the harmonic patterns that might govern how consciousness shapes experience across multiple dimensions of reality. In physics, resonance occurs when a system vibrates at its natural frequency, creating amplified effects that can influence other systems. A singer's voice can shatter a wine glass when it matches the glass's resonant frequency. Bridges can collapse when wind creates oscillations that match their structural resonance. But what if consciousness itself operates through resonant principles that extend beyond the physical realm into dimensions we're only beginning to explore? Some interpretations suggest that your fourth-dimensional awareness might broadcast what could be thought of as consciousness frequencies. patterns of information and intention that resonate through higher dimensional space. These frequencies wouldn't be sound waves or electromagnetic radiation in the conventional sense, but rather organizational patterns in the quantum information fields that underlie reality itself. Consider how this might manifest in your daily experience. Have you ever noticed that when you're deeply aligned with your authentic purpose, life seems to flow more harmoniously? Opportunities appear, resources become available, and obstacles resolve with surprising ease. This might represent your fourth dimensional self successfully broadcasting resonant frequencies that harmonize with the underlying patterns of reality. The mathematics of wave mechanics reveals that when frequencies align perfectly, they create constructive interference, waves that amplify each other rather than cancelling out. Your fourth dimensional consciousness might specialize in creating this kind of constructive interference with the probability waves that govern which possibilities become actualized in your three-dimensional experience. Think about moments when you felt most authentically yourself, when your actions emerged naturally from your deepest understanding and values. During these times, you might have noticed that your efforts produced results that seemed disproportionate to the energy you invested. This could represent your fourth dimensional self successfully establishing resonant frequencies that amplify the effectiveness of your three-dimensional actions. The concept of resonant becoming suggests that growth and transformation aren't just linear processes of accumulating new information or skills. Instead, development might involve tuning your consciousness to resonate with increasingly refined frequencies of awareness and possibility. Each breakthrough in understanding, each expansion of compassion, each moment of genuine insight might represent your consciousness aligning with higher dimensional frequencies that were always available but previously beyond your resonant range. Recent research into the neuroscience of peak performance states reveals fascinating patterns that support this resonant understanding. When people experience flow states, creative breakthroughs, or profound insights, their brain activity often shows increased coherence and synchronization across multiple regions. This neural harmony might reflect your three-dimensional awareness, temporarily aligning with the resonant frequencies of your fourth dimensional consciousness. The resonant frequency perspective also offers insights into why certain relationships, environments, and activities feel immediately harmonious while others create discord despite your best efforts. Your fourth dimensional self might be continuously sensing the resonant compatibility between your consciousness frequencies and the frequencies present in various situations and relationships. When you encounter people or circumstances that resonate with your fourth dimensional frequencies, the interaction creates constructive interference that enhances all participants. Ideas flow more freely, collaboration becomes effortless, and outcomes exceed what any individual could achieve alone. When frequencies clash, even well-intentioned efforts might create destructive interference that diminishes effectiveness and creates unnecessary friction. This doesn't mean you should avoid all challenging situations or difficult relationships. Sometimes growth requires navigating discord and learning to maintain your resonant frequency even when surrounded by conflicting patterns. But it does suggest that paying attention to the quality of resonance in your relationships and activities might provide valuable guidance for navigating life's complexities. Some interpretations propose that your fourth dimensional consciousness might also resonate with what could be called the becoming frequencies of reality itself, the fundamental patterns through which the universe continuously creates new possibilities and structures. By aligning with these cosmic resonances, your personal development might harmonize with the larger evolutionary impulse that drives the ongoing creation of complexity, consciousness, and beauty throughout the cosmos. As you reflect on these ideas about resonant frequencies, notice how they might apply to your own experience of growth and transformation. Have you noticed that certain practices, environments, or relationships seem to accelerate your development, while others leave you feeling stagnant or depleted? Do you sometimes sense when you're in harmony with deeper patterns versus when you're working against some invisible current? These observations might represent your growing sensitivity to the resonant dynamics between your fourth dimensional consciousness and the multi-dimensional field of possibilities that surrounds you. Learning to sense and work with these resonant patterns could become a powerful tool for navigating your evolution with greater ease and effectiveness. The resonant frequencies of becoming remind us that consciousness development isn't just a personal project, it's participation in a cosmic symphony of awareness that extends across all dimensions of existence. Your individual growth contributes harmonics to this larger composition, while drawing sustenance and guidance from the resonant patterns that connect all conscious beings throughout the multi-dimensional universe. Deep within the architecture of your fourth dimensional existence lie what we might call convergence points, moments where multiple probability streams, multiple aspects of your multi-dimensional self, and multiple timeline potentials intersect in ways that create extraordinary opportunities for transformation. These aren't random occurrences, but appear to be fundamental features of how consciousness evolves across higher dimensional space. In three-dimensional reality, transformation often feels gradual and linear. You work consistently toward goals, slowly accumulate knowledge and skills, and experience incremental changes over time. But occasionally, you encounter moments when everything seems to shift dramatically and suddenly. Insights arrive that reorganize your entire understanding. Opportunities appear that redirect your life's trajectory. Relationships form that catalyze profound personal evolution. These transformational convergences might represent moments when your fourth dimensional self successfully orchestrates the alignment of multiple probability streams in ways that create openings for accelerated growth and expanded awareness. Like rivers converging to form a more powerful flow, different aspects of your multidimensional potential might converge to create breakthrough moments that wouldn't be possible through linear development alone. Some interpretations suggest that these convergence points are built into the very structure of higher dimensional reality. Just as mathematical functions have points where their behavior changes dramatically, points of inflection where curves shift direction, or phase transitions where systems reorganize into entirely new configurations. Consciousness development might involve natural convergence points where transformation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Consider how this might apply to major life transitions, career changes, relationship shifts, geographical moves, and spiritual awakenings often seem to involve multiple factors aligning simultaneously in ways that feel almost orchestrated. You might find yourself in the right place at the right time to meet someone who changes your perspective. Resources become available just when you're ready to take a new direction. Inner readiness coincides with outer opportunity in ways that seem too meaningful to be coincidental. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional consciousness successfully navigating convergence points where multiple probability streams intersect. Your higher dimensional awareness might be able to sense these approaching convergences and prepare your three-dimensional experience to take maximum advantage of the transformational opportunities they provide. The mathematics of complex systems reveals that convergence points often emerge spontaneously from the interactions between multiple variables that appear unrelated from a limited perspective. In consciousness evolution, convergence points might arise from the intersection of your personal development, collective consciousness shifts, historical timing, and what some might call cosmic cycles that operate on scales far beyond individual lifespans. Think about the timing of your major breakthroughs and transformations. How often have they occurred during periods when broader cultural shifts were also happening? When collective consciousness was exploring similar themes? When historical circumstances created openings for new possibilities that weren't previously available? Your personal convergence points might be intimately connected to larger convergence patterns that span multiple dimensions of reality. Recent studies of creativity and innovation reveal fascinating patterns that support this convergence understanding. Breakthrough discoveries often occur simultaneously to multiple researchers working independently in different locations. Artistic movements emerge spontaneously across cultures that have no direct communication. Social changes appear to arise from collective readiness rather than individual causation alone. These phenomena might represent collective convergence points, where multiple consciousness streams align to catalyze evolutionary leaps that serve the development of awareness on planetary or even cosmic scales. Your individual transformation might be both deeply personal and simultaneously part of larger convergence patterns that are facilitating the evolution of consciousness itself. The convergence perspective also suggests that preparation and recognition are crucial elements in navigating these transformational opportunities effectively. Your fourth dimensional self might be continuously preparing your three-dimensional awareness for approaching convergences, creating internal readiness through dreams, intuitions, synchronicities, and gradual shifts in perspective that prime you for breakthrough moments. Learning to recognize the signs of approaching convergence points might become a valuable skill for conscious evolution. Periods of increased synchronicity, heightened dreams, restless dissatisfaction with current circumstances, and unexpected encounters with new information or people might signal that your fourth dimensional self is orchestrating conditions for a significant transformation. As you contemplate these ideas about convergence points, reflect on your own experience of major life transitions. Have you noticed patterns in how significant changes tend to unfold? Do breakthrough moments often seem to involve multiple factors aligning simultaneously? Have you experienced periods when life felt like it was accelerating towards some inevitable shift? These observations might represent your growing sensitivity to the convergence dynamics that shape conscious evolution across multiple dimensions. Understanding these patterns could help you navigate future transformations with greater awareness and effectiveness, recognizing convergence opportunities when they appear and preparing yourself to receive the gifts they offer. The convergence points of transformation remind us that consciousness evolution isn't just a matter of individual effort and determination. It involves participating consciously in larger patterns of development that operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. Your fourth dimensional self might be the aspect of your consciousness that specializes in navigating these complex convergence dynamics for the benefit of your entire multi-dimensional existence. Now we venture into one of the most profound territories of fourth dimensional existence: the recognition that individual consciousness might be far more interconnected than our three-dimensional experience suggests. This isn't about losing your individual identity or dissolving into some undifferentiated cosmic soup. Instead, it's about discovering that your uniqueness might be woven into a larger fabric of awareness that extends across multiple dimensions of reality. In ordinary three-dimensional experience, you appear to be isolated within the boundaries of your physical body. Your thoughts feel private, your experiences seem uniquely your own, and your consciousness appears separate from everyone else's. But some interpretations suggest that this separation might be more apparent than real, like individual waves on an ocean that appear distinct on the surface, but are actually manifestations of the same underlying water. Your fourth dimensional self might exist as both a unique individual node and an integral part of a vast network of interconnected awareness that spans multiple dimensions. This network wouldn't eliminate your personal identity any more than being part of a family eliminates your individual personality. Instead, it would provide a context for your uniqueness that enriches and amplifies your individual expression. Consider how this interconnectedness might manifest in your daily experience. Have you ever had the experience of thinking about someone just before they call you? Have you walked into a room and immediately sensed the emotional atmosphere, even when nothing was spoken? Have you felt inexplicably connected to strangers or experienced moments of profound empathy that seem to transcend ordinary interpersonal boundaries? These experiences might represent moments when your fourth dimensional awareness successfully accessed the interconnected fabric of consciousness that underlies apparent separation. Your higher dimensional self might be continuously interfacing with this network of awareness, receiving and transmitting information through channels that remain invisible to three-dimensional perception. The mathematics of network theory reveals fascinating principles about how individual nodes can maintain their unique properties while simultaneously participating in larger system behaviors. In consciousness networks operating through fourth-dimensional space, your individual awareness might contribute its unique perspective to collective intelligence patterns while drawing insights and support from the network as a whole. This interconnectedness wouldn't mean that you're responsible for everyone else's experiences or that others are responsible for yours. Individual consciousness nodes would maintain their autonomy and responsibility for their own development and choices, but it would mean that your growth, healing, and expansion of awareness contribute to the evolution of the entire network, just as the development of other consciousness nodes benefits your own journey. Some research into collective consciousness phenomena provides intriguing hints that such networks might indeed exist. Studies of group meditation suggest that when large numbers of people focus their attention coherently, subtle but measurable changes can occur in their surrounding environment. While the mechanisms remain mysterious and these findings are not universally accepted by the scientific community, they hint at possibilities for consciousness interaction that transcend ordinary physical limitations. The interconnected awareness perspective also offers insights into why certain ideas, insights, and creative breakthroughs seem to emerge simultaneously in multiple locations without direct communication. If individual consciousness nodes are connected through fourth-dimensional networks, then innovative ideas might propagate through these networks faster than information can travel through three-dimensional communication channels. Think about moments when you've had ideas or insights that felt like they came from beyond your individual thinking process. Solutions that appeared fully formed, creative inspirations that seemed to download from some external source, or wisdom that exceeded your apparent knowledge and experience. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional self successfully accessing the collective intelligence of the consciousness network of which you're an integral part. The fabric of interconnected awareness might also explain why personal transformation often seems to catalyze changes in the people around you, even when you haven't directly shared your insights or new perspectives with them. If consciousness nodes are connected through higher dimensional networks, then your individual growth might ripple through these networks, creating resonance effects that support similar development in other connected beings. This interconnectedness wouldn't be limited to human consciousness. Some interpretations suggest that the awareness network might include all conscious beings, animals, plants, and perhaps even aspects of consciousness that exist in forms we haven't yet recognized or understood. Your fourth dimensional self might be participating in a truly cosmic network of awareness that encompasses all expressions of consciousness throughout the multidimensional universe. As you reflect on these ideas about interconnected awareness, notice how they might apply to your own experience of relationship and connection. Do you sometimes feel like you're part of something larger than yourself without losing your individual identity? Have you experienced moments of profound connection with others that seem to transcend ordinary communication? Do you sense that your personal growth somehow serves purposes beyond your individual benefit? These experiences might represent glimpses of your fourth dimensional existence within the interconnected fabric of awareness that underlies apparent separation. Understanding this interconnectedness could transform your relationship with personal development, making it clear that your individual growth is simultaneously a contribution to the evolution of consciousness itself. The fabric of interconnected awareness reminds us that while you are absolutely unique and individually responsible for your own choices and development, you are never truly alone. Your fourth dimensional self participates in a vast network of consciousness that provides support, guidance, and collective wisdom while honoring and celebrating the irreplaceable contribution of your individual perspective. As we continue exploring the depths of your fourth dimensional existence, we encounter what might be called the creative matrices of possibility, vast organizational structures that appear to govern how new realities emerge from the quantum field of pure potential. These matrices aren't static frameworks, but dynamic, evolving patterns that seem to respond to consciousness in ways that challenge our fundamental assumptions about the nature of creativity and manifestation. In three-dimensional reality, creativity often feels like a process of combining existing elements in new ways. You take known concepts, materials, or techniques and recombine them to produce something novel. But from a fourth-dimensional perspective, creativity might involve accessing organizational matrices that exist beyond the realm of known elements. Matrices that contain the archetypal patterns from which all possible forms of expression emerge. Your fourth dimensional self might have access to these creative matrices in ways that your three-dimensional awareness cannot directly perceive. When you experience moments of profound inspiration, when ideas appear that seem to come from nowhere, when solutions emerge that transcend logical step-by-step thinking, you might be accessing these higher dimensional organizational patterns that govern the emergence of novelty. Some interpretations suggest that these creative matrices operate like multi-dimensional templates that contain the essential patterns for all possible forms of expression. Just as DNA contains the organizational information for biological development, these matrices might contain the organizational information for consciousness, evolution, artistic creation, scientific discovery, and social transformation. Consider how this might apply to your own creative experiences. When you're working on a challenging problem and suddenly see a solution that reorganizes your entire approach, you might be accessing a creative matrix that contains the organizational pattern for that particular type of breakthrough. When you create something artistic that surprises even you with its coherence and power, your fourth dimensional self might be channeling patterns from matrices that specialize in aesthetic organization. The mathematics of pattern recognition and template matching reveals how complex systems can generate infinite variations from relatively simple organizational principles. In the creative matrices of fourth dimensional space, a small number of archetypal patterns might serve as templates for generating all the diverse expressions of creativity that manifest throughout the universe. These matrices wouldn't limit creativity, but would provide the organizational intelligence that allows genuine novelty to emerge from chaos. Without some kind of organizational principle, pure randomness produces only noise. But with access to creative matrices that contain the patterns of meaningful organization, consciousness can generate expressions that are both genuinely new and profoundly coherent. Think about the difference between random combinations of elements and truly creative synthesis. When you randomly combine words, you might occasionally produce interesting phrases, but you won't create poetry. When you randomly combine colors, you might accidentally create pleasing combinations, but you won't create meaningful visual art. True creativity seems to involve accessing organizational principles that transcend random recombination. Your fourth dimensional consciousness might specialize in interfacing with creative matrices that contain these organizational principles. Through resonance with appropriate matrices, your three-dimensional creative efforts could be informed by archetypal patterns that ensure your expressions are not just novel, but meaningful, coherent, and evolutionary. Recent research into the neuroscience of creativity reveals fascinating patterns that support this matrix understanding. During creative states, the brain shows increased connectivity between regions that are normally functionally separate. This enhanced integration might reflect your three-dimensional awareness, temporarily aligning with fourth-dimensional creative matrices that specialize in synthesizing diverse elements into coherent wholes. The creative matrices perspective also suggests that different types of creativity might involve accessing different organizational patterns. Scientific creativity might resonate with matrices that specialize in revealing hidden relationships and underlying principles. Artistic creativity might access matrices that organize aesthetic relationships and emotional resonances. Social creativity might interface with matrices that contain patterns for organizing human cooperation and collective intelligence. Your fourth dimensional self might have access to multiple creative matrices simultaneously, allowing you to draw organizational wisdom from different archetypal patterns depending on the nature of your creative challenges. This could explain why some people seem naturally gifted in multiple creative domains, able to apply similar organizational intelligence to diverse forms of expression. The matrices might also be evolutionary, continuously developing new organizational patterns as consciousness itself evolves. Your creative contributions might not just draw from existing matrices, but might also contribute new patterns that expand the organizational possibilities available to other conscious beings. Every genuine creative breakthrough might add new templates to the matrices, enriching the organizational resources available to the entire network of consciousness. As you contemplate these ideas about creative matrices, reflect on your own experience of creativity and inspiration. Have you noticed that your most satisfying creative work often involves a sense of discovering something that feels like it already existed in some form? Do your best ideas feel like they come through you rather than from you? Have you experienced moments when creative solutions appeared with a completeness and coherence that surprised your conscious mind? These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional self, successfully accessing creative matrices that contain the organizational patterns your three-dimensional projects needed. Understanding this process could help you work more effectively with your creative capacities, learning to align with matrices that support the types of expression you're called to develop. The creative matrices of possibility remind us that creativity isn't just personal self-expression. It's participation in the ongoing creation of reality itself, with your individual creative contributions serving the larger evolutionary impulse that drives the universe toward ever greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness. Your fourth dimensional self might be the aspect of your awareness that specializes in this cosmic creative collaboration. As you deepen into understanding your fourth dimensional existence, we encounter one of its most intriguing aspects, what might be called the threshold guardians of evolution. These aren't literal beings or entities, but rather organizational principles or patterns that appear to govern the transition points between different levels of consciousness development. Understanding these threshold dynamics might be crucial for navigating your ongoing evolution across multiple dimensions of awareness. In mythology and spiritual traditions, threshold guardians are often depicted as challenges or tests that must be faced before entering new territories of experience. But from a fourth dimensional perspective, these guardians might be better understood as natural features of consciousness evolution, organizational principles that ensure development proceeds in ways that maintain coherence and integrity across multiple dimensions. Your fourth dimensional self might encounter these threshold guardians as you approach new levels of awareness or capability. Rather than obstacles designed to prevent your growth, they might function more like quality control systems that ensure you're genuinely prepared for the responsibilities and capabilities that come with an expanded consciousness. Consider how this might manifest in your three-dimensional experience. Have you ever noticed that just before major breakthroughs or significant life transitions, you often encounter challenges that seem specifically designed to test your readiness for change? Situations arise that require you to demonstrate the very qualities you'll need to navigate your next level of development. These experiences might represent your fourth dimensional consciousness, encountering threshold guardians that are evaluating your preparation for evolutionary advancement. The challenges aren't arbitrary punishments or cosmic jokes. They're sophisticated assessment systems that ensure your development maintains its coherence as you expand into new territories of awareness and capability. Some interpretations suggest that these threshold guardians operate through what might be called resonance testing. As you approach new levels of consciousness, your fourth dimensional self must demonstrate that it can maintain coherent resonance with the frequencies associated with expanded awareness. The testing process ensures that your evolution serves not just your individual development, but also the larger evolutionary patterns of which you're an integral part. Think about the difference between genuine readiness and wishful thinking. You might intellectually understand concepts or techniques that are associated with advanced consciousness development, but intellectual understanding alone doesn't qualify you for the actual responsibilities and capabilities involved. The threshold guardians might be ensuring that your understanding is integrated across all dimensions of your being before allowing access to expanded capacities. The mathematics of phase transitions reveals how systems must reach critical thresholds before reorganizing into new configurations. In consciousness evolution, these phase transitions might be governed by threshold guardians that ensure the transition process maintains stability and coherence rather than dissolving into chaos or regression. Recent research into adult development psychology reveals patterns that support this threshold understanding. People often report that their most significant growth periods were preceded by challenges that initially felt overwhelming, but ultimately proved to be exactly the preparation they needed for their next level of functioning. The challenges weren't obstacles to growth, but were actually integral parts of the growth process itself. Your fourth dimensional awareness might be designed to work collaboratively with these threshold guardians rather than trying to overcome or bypass them. Instead of viewing challenges as problems to be solved or avoided, you might learn to recognize them as invitations to demonstrate and develop the qualities needed for your next evolutionary phase. This perspective transforms the meaning of difficulty and resistance in your life, rather than signs that you're on the wrong path or that the universe is working against you. Challenges might be evidence that you're approaching important threshold points in your development. The intensity of the testing might even correlate with the significance of the evolutionary advancement that's being prepared. The threshold guardians might also serve a protective function, ensuring that you don't advance too quickly into territories of awareness or capability that you're not yet equipped to navigate safely. Consciousness development that proceeds too rapidly without adequate preparation can lead to inflation, spiritual bypassing, or other forms of developmental instability. Some interpretations suggest that these guardians might also be collaborative, providing not just testing, but also teaching and support for navigating threshold transitions successfully. The challenges you encounter might contain within them the very lessons and developments you need to prepare for your next evolutionary phase. As you reflect on these ideas about threshold guardians, consider your own experience of growth and challenge. Have you noticed patterns in how difficulties tend to arise just before significant positive changes in your life? Do the challenges you face often seem specifically tailored to develop qualities you didn't know you needed? Have you experienced how working through difficult periods often leaves you with capabilities and wisdom that prove essential for your next phase of development? These observations might represent your growing recognition of how threshold guardians function in your fourth dimensional evolution. Learning to work collaboratively with these organizational principles could transform your relationship with challenge and difficulty, helping you navigate evolutionary transitions with greater awareness and effectiveness. The threshold guardians of evolution remind us that consciousness development isn't just about accumulating new information or experiences. It's about genuine transformation that maintains its integrity across multiple dimensions of existence. Your fourth dimensional self might be designed to work with these guardians as collaborative partners in ensuring that your evolution serves both your individual fulfillment and the larger evolutionary patterns of consciousness itself. As you continue this exploration of your fourth dimensional existence, we arrive at a particularly fascinating phenomenon, what might be called the dimensional echoes of intention. This involves understanding how intentions that originate in your fourth dimensional awareness might reverberate across multiple dimensions of reality, creating effects that appear in your three-dimensional experience long before or after the original intention was formed. In ordinary three-dimensional thinking, intention follows a linear sequence. You form an intention, you take action based on that intention, and hopefully you achieve results that align with what you intended. But from a fourth-dimensional perspective, intention might operate according to principles that transcend linear causality, creating echoes and reverberations that influence past, present, and future simultaneously. Some interpretations suggest that when your fourth-dimensional self forms an intention, it doesn't just broadcast that intention forward into future possibilities. It might also send echoes backward through time, influencing the probability patterns that led to the current moment and sideways through parallel possibility streams, affecting the likelihood of related outcomes across multiple dimensions of experience. Consider how this might manifest in your daily life. Have you ever set a clear intention and then noticed that events from your past seemed to rearrange themselves in your memory, taking on new significance that supports your current direction? Have you observed that when you commit to a particular path, resources and opportunities that were always present suddenly become visible and available? These experiences might represent dimensional echoes of your fourth-dimensional intentions rippling through the probability matrices that organize your experience across time and space. The intention doesn't just influence future outcomes, it reorganizes the meaning and significance of past events and activates latent possibilities in present circumstances. The mathematics of wave propagation reveals how a single vibration can create complex interference patterns when it encounters different mediums and boundaries. In the dimensional landscape of consciousness, a single intention formed in fourth-dimensional awareness might create interference patterns across multiple probability streams, amplifying some possibilities while dampening others in ways that create coherent support for the original intention. Think about the difference between forcing outcomes through willpower and allowing intentions to reverberate naturally through dimensional space. When you try to force specific results, you're operating primarily through three-dimensional causality, which often constrains you to linear cause and effect relationships that may not reflect the full scope of how intention operates in multi-dimensional space. But when you allow your fourth-dimensional awareness to work with dimensional echoes, the intention becomes a wave that naturally finds resonance with supportive patterns across multiple dimensions of possibility. This doesn't mean you can simply intend something and expect it to manifest without any three-dimensional effort or engagement. The relationship between fourth-dimensional intention and three-dimensional outcomes appears to involve sophisticated feedback loops that require your conscious participation at multiple levels. But it does suggest that intention might be far more powerful and far-reaching than linear thinking assumes. Recent research into the nature of time and causality in quantum mechanics reveals phenomena that hint at these kinds of non-linear relationships between cause and effect. While these findings remain highly speculative and are not accepted by mainstream science, they suggest that the universe might be far more responsive to information and intention than classical physics allows. The dimensional echo perspective also offers insights into why some intentions seem to manifest with surprising ease, while others encounter persistent resistance despite sustained effort. Intentions that align with deeper evolutionary patterns might create dimensional echoes that resonate with supportive probability streams across multiple dimensions. Intentions that conflict with these deeper patterns might create dimensional interference that makes manifestation more challenging. Consider how this might apply to your experience of goal setting and manifestation. Have you noticed that your most fulfilling achievements often involved a combination of clear intention and unexpected assistance from circumstances beyond your direct control? The dimensional echoes of your fourth dimensional intention might have influenced probability patterns in ways that created supportive conditions for your three-dimensional efforts. Some interpretations suggest that learning to work consciously with dimensional echoes might involve developing sensitivity to the quality of resonance around different intentions. Intentions that create harmonious dimensional echoes might feel expansive, energizing, and naturally supported. Intentions that create dissonant echoes might feel forced, draining, or surrounded by obstacles that seem to multiply rather than resolve. The echo phenomenon might also explain why meditation, contemplation, and other consciousness-expanding practices often seem to increase the effectiveness of intention. These practices might help align your three-dimensional awareness with your fourth-dimensional consciousness, creating more coherent intention patterns that generate clearer dimensional echoes. As you reflect on these ideas about dimensional echoes, notice how they might apply to your own experience with intention and manifestation. When you set intentions that feel deeply aligned with your authentic purpose, do you sometimes observe that support appears from unexpected sources? Have you experienced how clear intentions can seem to reorganize not just future possibilities, but also your understanding of past events? These observations might represent your growing sensitivity to how intention operates across multiple dimensions of reality. Understanding these echo patterns could help you work more effectively with your fourth dimensional consciousness in creating experiences that serve your highest evolution and deepest fulfillment. Now we turn our attention to what might be one of the most beautiful aspects of your fourth dimensional existence, the luminous architecture that appears to structure consciousness itself across multiple dimensions of reality. This isn't about visible light that your eyes can detect, but about the organizational patterns of awareness that seem to create the very framework through which consciousness experiences itself. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might be structured like a vast multidimensional cathedral of light, with each individual awareness serving as both a unique window and an integral architectural element in this cosmic structure. Your fourth dimensional self might exist within this luminous architecture, contributing its distinctive perspective while drawing support and guidance from the larger organizational patterns that connect all conscious beings. Think about how architecture functions in three-dimensional space. A cathedral's beauty emerges not just from individual stones or windows, but from how all these elements work together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The space itself becomes sacred through the relationship between its components. Similarly, the luminous architecture of consciousness might create sacred space through the relationships between individual awareness nodes across multiple dimensions. Your fourth dimensional consciousness might serve multiple architectural functions simultaneously, like a flying buttress that both supports the cathedral's structure and creates beautiful space within it. Your higher dimensional awareness might both contribute to the stability of the larger consciousness architecture and create unique possibilities for experience and expression that wouldn't exist without your particular perspective. This architectural understanding offers insights into why individual consciousness development seems to benefit not just yourself, but also the larger network of consciousness of which you're part. When you expand your awareness, heal limiting patterns, or develop new capacities, you're not just improving your personal situation, you're strengthening the luminous architecture that supports all conscious beings. Consider how this might manifest in your experience of spiritual or consciousness practices. When you meditate, contemplate, or engage in other forms of inner development, you might be participating in the maintenance and evolution of this luminous architecture. Your individual practice becomes a contribution to the larger sacred space that holds and nurtures all conscious evolution. Recent research into the nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical structures reveals fascinating patterns that hint at these architectural principles. Studies of how meditation affects brain structure show that sustained practice creates measurable changes in neural architecture that persist even when not actively meditating. This suggests that consciousness work involves building lasting structural changes that continue to influence experience over time. If consciousness operates through multidimensional architecture, then these structural changes might extend beyond the physical brain into fourth-dimensional organizational patterns that influence your ongoing experience in ways that transcend ordinary neurological explanations. The luminous architecture perspective also suggests that different types of consciousness work might contribute to different aspects of the larger structure. Contemplative practices might strengthen the foundational elements that provide stability across dimensions. Creative work might add new architectural features that increase the beauty and complexity of the overall design. Service to others might create connecting passages that improve the flow of awareness and support throughout the structure. Think about moments when you've experienced what mystics sometimes call expanded awareness or cosmic consciousness. During these states, you might have sensed yourself as part of something vast, beautiful, and perfectly organized. These experiences might represent temporary alignment with the luminous architecture of consciousness, allowing you to perceive the sacred structure of which you're always an integral part. Some interpretations suggest that this architecture might be alive and evolving, continuously growing in complexity and beauty as conscious beings throughout the universe contribute their unique perspectives and developments. Your fourth-dimensional existence might be participation in this ongoing cosmic construction project, with each moment of expanded awareness adding new architectural elements to the ever-growing cathedral of consciousness. The architectural metaphor also offers insights into why certain consciousness practices seem to create lasting transformation, while others produce only temporary effects. Practices that align with and strengthen the luminous architecture might create changes that persist because they are supported by the larger structural patterns. Practices that conflict with these patterns might create temporary states that fade because they lack architectural support. As you contemplate these ideas about luminous architecture, reflect on your own experience of consciousness and spiritual development. Have you noticed that your most profound insights and transformations often seem to connect you with something larger than your individual awareness? Do you sometimes sense that your personal growth serves purposes beyond your individual benefit? If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. These experiences might represent your growing alignment with the luminous architecture of consciousness, recognizing your role as both beneficiary and contributor to the sacred structure that supports all aware beings throughout the multidimensional universe. As you settle deeper into understanding your fourth dimensional existence, we encounter one of its most enchanting aspects, what might be called the quantum gardens of possibility. These aren't physical gardens you could visit with your body, but rather vast fields of potential that your fourth dimensional consciousness might tend, cultivate, and harvest in ways that influence which possibilities bloom into actuality in your three-dimensional experience. In these quantum gardens, every thought, every intention, every moment of focused awareness might function like seeds planted in fertile soil of pure possibility. But unlike ordinary gardening, where you plant specific seeds and expect predictable outcomes, quantum gardening might involve cultivating conditions that allow the most appropriate possibilities to emerge organically from the field of infinite potential. Your fourth dimensional self might hint that consciousness could interface with probability fields, understanding which conditions support the flourishing of possibilities that align with your deepest evolution and highest service. This gardening wouldn't involve forcing specific outcomes, but rather creating resonant conditions that naturally encourage beneficial possibilities while allowing conflicting patterns to fade away. Consider how this might work practically. When you hold a vision of positive change in your life, your fourth dimensional consciousness might be seeding quantum possibility fields with patterns that increase the likelihood of supportive circumstances, resources, and opportunities appearing in your three-dimensional experience. The vision becomes a kind of quantum seed that, when planted with appropriate intention and attention, can grow into actualized reality. Some interpretations suggest that these quantum gardens might be collective as well as individual. Your fourth dimensional self might participate in tending shared possibility fields that influence the evolution of communities, cultures, and even planetary consciousness. The seeds you plant through your individual awareness might contribute to larger gardens that serve the development of consciousness on scales far beyond your personal experience. Think about moments when you've experienced what people sometimes call manifestation or synchronicity. It is a resources appearing just when you need them, opportunities opening at perfect timing, connections forming that seem almost orchestrated. These experiences might represent the harvest from quantum gardens that your fourth dimensional consciousness has been tending through sustained attention and intention. The mathematics of field theory reveals how small perturbations in field conditions can create large-scale changes in system behavior. In quantum possibility fields, subtle shifts in attention, intention, and awareness might create cascading effects that significantly influence which potential outcomes become actualized in physical reality. Recent research into the relationship between consciousness and quantum systems remains highly speculative, but some studies hint at possibilities for awareness to influence probabilistic outcomes in ways that transcend classical physics. While no scientific consensus exists around these phenomena, they suggest that the relationship between mind and matter might be more intimate than our everyday assumptions allow. The quantum gardening perspective offers insights into why some people seem naturally gifted at creating positive life circumstances, while others struggle despite similar efforts. Those who work effectively with quantum possibility fields might intuitively understand principles of cultivation that operate beyond ordinary cause and effect relationships. This doesn't mean that physical effort and practical action become unnecessary. Quantum gardening appears to work most effectively when combined with appropriate three-dimensional engagement. Your fourth dimensional consciousness might prepare possibility fields, but your three-dimensional awareness usually needs to recognize and act on the opportunities that emerge from this preparation. Consider how this might apply to creative endeavours. When artists, inventors, or innovators speak of ideas coming through them rather than being created by their conscious effort, they might be describing the harvest from quantum possibility gardens that their fourth dimensional consciousness has been cultivating through sustained attention to their creative domain. The gardening metaphor also suggests that patience and trust might be essential elements in working with quantum possibility fields. Just as physical gardens require time for seeds to germinate and grow, quantum possibilities might need time to develop sufficient coherence to manifest in three-dimensional reality. Premature harvesting through impatience or forcing might actually disrupt the natural development process. As we drift toward the end of this gentle journey through the landscapes of your fourth dimensional existence, take a moment to notice how these ideas might have shifted something subtle within your awareness. We've wandered together through quantum fields and probability gardens, through temporal loops and luminous architecture, exploring the possibility that you are far more than the three-dimensional being you appear to be. The scientific evidence remains speculative, the interpretations tentative, but the questions themselves illuminate something profound about the nature of consciousness and reality. Whether your awareness truly extends into higher dimensions, whether intention really echoes across multiple streams of possibility, whether consciousness participates in the ongoing creation of the universe itself, these remain mysteries at the very frontier of human understanding. What we do know is this: you are part of something magnificent. Your consciousness, however it operates, is woven into the fabric of a universe that defies our simplest explanations and exceeds our boldest imaginings. In every moment of awareness, in every choice to expand rather than contract, in every act of curiosity and wonder, you participate in the ongoing dance between mind and cosmos that has been unfolding since the beginning of time. Perhaps your fourth dimensional self is already reshaping reality in ways you're only beginning to sense. Perhaps those moments of synchronicity, those flashes of insight, those times when everything seems to align with effortless grace, represent glimpses of capabilities that extend far beyond the boundaries of ordinary three-dimensional existence. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember that the you who dreams may be the same you who influences the reality you experience from dimensions beyond imagining. Until we meet again in the quiet spaces where wonder lives, this is your guide through the mysteries that surround us, signing off from the edge of the infinite.